Okay, get ready for a deep dive today. We're looking at a Substack post called "This Is Not the End."
Interesting title, right?
Yeah, it kind of grabs you, doesn't it?
Definitely makes you wonder what it's all about.
Right. And it's by the Appalachian Gorilla.
Yeah, cool name. I like how they lean into that. Makes you want to read it just to see what it's all about, you know?
For sure. And let me tell you, it's a real thought-provoking piece. It ties together progress, civilization, and get this, something you use literally every single day.
I know, right?
Like, it's right there, but you never think about it.
Exactly. And the way the author brings all these big ideas together, it really makes you look at things differently. It's kind of amazing.
Totally. It's like he throws down this challenge right from the title, this is not the end. And you're just like, hold on, what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's like ominous almost, but also hopeful.
Right. It's kind of both.
It's a great hook. It just pulls you right in and makes you question everything you thought you knew.
Exactly. And he starts off by asking this really thought-provoking question. He's like, okay, so if democracy and, liberalism are supposed to be all about progress, right? How come ancient civilizations like the Greeks and Romans didn't see the same kind of massive population growth that we see today?
It's so obvious, but you never really think about it, do you?
Yeah.
We tend to assume that human progress is just this constant upward climb. But he makes you wonder, what if there's more to the story?
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting because he brings in this visual, a population graph, but it spans 100,000 years. And it shows this huge spike right around the Industrial Revolution. I mean, come on.
Totally not a coincidence.
Right. And that's his whole point. He's saying all this incredible population growth didn't just happen because of democracy or new ideas. He says there's something much more fundamental going on. Energy. Okay, so how does he connect energy to populate? Walk me through it.
So he talks about coal and oil, right?
Well,
he says those discoveries were a total game changer.
Because
suddenly we had access to all this cheap, readily available energy. And that unlocked all kinds of crazy potential, especially when it came to growing and transporting food.
So he's saying that our whole modern world, all the people and the global systems, all of it, wouldn't even be possible without fossil fuels.
Basically, yeah. Which is kind of a radical idea when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
We're so used to hears about human ingenuity and how amazing we are. But he's saying, hold on a second, look at the energy. That's the real story here.
Okay, I'm following you so far, but how does this energy stuff, how does that affect me every day? I mean, I get that there's more people now, but what's the direct connection?
Yeah, it's not always obvious. But this is where things get really interesting. The author dives into, get this, agriculture.
Agriculture. Huh, okay. How so?
It might seem kind of random, but it actually makes total sense when you think about it. So, for most of human history, farming, it wasn't exactly a guaranteed success,
Right, totally at the mercy of the weather.
Exactly. Droughts, floods, you name it. Not exactly a recipe for, a thriving society.
No, not really. So how did they convince people to keep farming then?
That's the thing, right? They had to sweeten the deal somehow.
Interesting.
Yeah. So throughout history, you see all these systems popping up.
Yeah.
Serfdom, sharecropping,
Right.
Even today, it's government subsidies. The author's point is, farming has always needed help to stay afloat.
And now that help comes from oil.
Bingo. Cheap, plentiful oil. It revolutionized everything. Suddenly you have fertilizers, pesticides, these massive tractors and combines.
Oh, yeah. Those things are huge.
Right. And don't forget about transportation. We can ship food all over the planet now, all thanks to oil.
Wow. When you put it like that, it's kind of crazy. Instead of humans or animals doing the work, it's just fossil fuels.
Pretty wild, right? And it gets even crazier. He uses this really cool example. Headphones.
Headphones?
Yeah. He uses them to show how dependent we are on oil, even for stuff we don't even think about.
Yeah.
You probably have some nearby right now, right?
Actually, yeah. Right here.
See, most people do. And that's the whole point. It's like this symbol of how much we consume. Think about all the stuff that goes into your headphones. The mining for the materials, the factories, the plastic, the packaging, the shipping. Every single step uses energy, and that energy comes from oil.
Wow, yeah. It's easy to forget all that when you just see the finished product,
Totally. And to really drive the point home, he throws out this crazy statistic. He says for every 1 calorie of food we eat, 10 calories of fossil fuel energy went into making it happen.
10.
Seriously. And remember that average 1,600 miles are food travels.
Yeah, it's insane.
It makes you wonder.
Yeah.
At what cost, how convenient do we really need to be?
Okay, so We've talked about how much our lives depend on oil, like even more than we realize. But this Substack post is called This Is Not the End. And right now, it kind of feels like we're heading for an energy crisis, you know?
Right, like what happens when the oil runs out? That's the big question.
Exactly.
And this is where the author brings up fracking.
Fracking. Yeah, that's like a whole thing these days.
It is. It's everywhere.
But to be honest, I don't totally get it.
Basically, it's a way to get oil and gas out of places we couldn't reach before.
Oh,
Like they use these high pressure fluids to crack the rock and get the oil out.
sounds kind of intense.
It is. And expensive, which is the point the author is making. Fracking takes way more energy than regular drilling. Remember when we were talking about EROI?
Energy return on investment, right?
Yes. And with fracking, that return, it's way lower.
So we're putting in like more effort for less reward.
Exactly. And not just less reward, but for a shorter time, too. The author makes the point that with fracking, the output drops off really quickly.
So it's not a long-term solution.
Exactly. And that's what he's getting at, you know?
Yeah.
It's just another example of how unsustainable all of this is. We're desperate to keep living the way we are, so we resort to these extreme measures.
Makes you think of that saying, kicking the can down the road.
Yes. It's like we're on this runaway train, and instead of hitting the brakes, we just throw more coal in the engine.
So where does that leave us then? If we're on this crazy train, where does the "this is not the end" part come in? Is he being like ironic?
It's actually really profound. There's this Voltaire quote he uses. History is full of the sounds of glass slippers going down the steps and wooden shoes climbing up.
Okay, that's a good one. I like the imagery. But what's it mean here?
Well, think about it. When civilizations are at their peak, like super successful and powerful, they get used to their comfy way of life, represented by the fancy glass slippers.
Right, totally.
And they forget how fragile it all is.
Okay, I get it. So the wooden shoes are?
The ones who come after. The people who maybe weren't as privileged before, the ones who haven't forgotten what it's like to struggle, the ones who are more grounded, they represent a shift, a return to a simpler way of life.
So he's making a comparison to Rome, to the Greeks, all those civilizations that were huge, but then, boom, they're gone.
Exactly. He's saying our modern world, with all its oil and gadgets, it might be a lot more fragile than we think.
This is not the end. Not as like a prediction, but like you said, a fact. There have been other ends, haven't there? Wow, it really makes you think.
And that's the whole point, right? To get us thinking. He's not trying to scare anyone. He just wants us to be aware, to learn from the past.
To think about what happens when the oil really does run out.
What will our wooden shoes look like?
Exactly. What will that new world be like? It's a big question. But hey, that's what a good deep dive is all about, right? It gets you thinking. If you want to learn more and do some thinking of your own, you can find a link to the Appalachian Gorilla's Substack post over in the show notes. And until next time, keep exploring. Okay,